Welcome to the Your Next Move podcast with Kimberly Brown. Today we have one of my very close friends, business bestie, Tara Paton. We met at an event back in 2019?
Top of 2020.
Top of 2020.
Yeah.
I get them all confused. So top of 2020, we met at an event. We realized we had the same nail tech. We missed each other by 6 months at a company. And we both lived in the state of New Jersey within like 30 minutes of each other. And we didn't know why we weren't best friends. So therefore, we became best friends. So today we're going to talk a lot about recovering from corporate PTSD. As we've both moved out of corporate America, we realize there are so many different emotions that you have where you have to break out of this corporate mindset. And there's experiences that you'll have as an entrepreneur, and how you tackle them can be based upon your experience in the corporate world. And again, when I say corporate, I mean any traditional 9-to-5 job and then transitioning into your entrepreneurship. So Tara has spent over a decade working with major corporations and startups. She's created and sold million-dollar products for major beauty brands and developed sales strategies that made Fortune 500 companies millions of dollars. Today, Tara works with beauty and wellness entrepreneurs to increase their revenue, building customer traffic, and expand their product lines. Tara has worked with everyone from Whole Foods to L'Oreal to American Express. The girl knows her stuff. And I am proud to call her friend. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Anytime, anytime. So you've had such a fantastic career at these companies. What made you decide to leave the corporate side of things and focus on marketing, especially for beauty brands?
That's a great question. So I decided to leave corporate. It was a few things, right? I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just didn't know what that looked like. I could say like back in undergrad, my mentor was like, no, you don't want to go into entrepreneurship yet. Like you need to get some experience. But I actually started my own hair care company before I knew how to actually market products.
Got it.
And that was, can I cuss?
Yeah, you can go.
It was a shit show.
Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to get my product sold. And then I went back to business school with the intent to learn what I needed to learn to restart my company.
Okay.
That didn't happen. I found out that I could work for these CPG companies, and I went into the corporate space and started to learn from the corporate, these large corporations that sell and market products, how to actually do it. And I fell in love with it. So I left that more traditional marketing job. And when I left, people who were starting brands, people who had brands already were asking me to help them with their marketing. They were like, hey, you used to work here. Could you help me do this, this, and that? And I started to do it just as a side hustle. I was in a totally different career at that time. I was in relationship management and business development. And so it just became like a passion. And then I realized when I helped one of my clients actually launch a product that replaced her income, I was like, oh, okay, like I should be charging.
Yeah.
Right.
This isn't fun anymore.
I was like, I should be charging for this. This is actually, that's when it clicked for me. Like everything that I had gone through from starting my own product, it failing, me going back to business school to actually figure out how to do this the right way, working for these larger corporations, and then helping someone, a small business, launch their product successfully. That's when I realized everything was lined up. Everything was aligned for me to come back and be that coach and that consultant. So that's how I got there.
I love that. Such a robust career. So when we say the term corporate PTSD, what does that mean to you when you hear it?
So it's interesting. Corporate PTSD, I didn't know it was a thing. I didn't know what it was. But essentially, you think about PTSD just without the corporate on front of it. It's post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'm not a professional, clinical professional or anything like that. So if I misspeak, this is just from my knowledge, right?
Mental health advice.
Right.
Disclaimer.
We're not giving advice.
Yes.
But, you know, it's a stress, a trauma that occurs in the corporate workspace. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, throughout my career, throughout the different roles that I've had, there had been some traumas that came up. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that there was trauma until I had left corporate, and someone who is a psychologist was like, I was talking to her just about my experience and what I was going through once I initially left corporate. And she was like, you sound like you might have PTSD. I think you need to go talk to a therapist, get a specialist, and, you know, get diagnosed or get help with that. And so that is how I found out about this term. I don't want to call it phenomenon, but the term.
That makes perfect sense. I think there's so many circumstances that really shape who we are for better or for worse. And we're talking about corporate PSD, especially when you're going into entrepreneurship. There could be experiences that really impact you. I know for me, I think I told you before that I was in a client meeting for my business Manifest Yourself, and it was getting a little tense. And I knew we had to follow up to kind of address that issue. And I was so anxious, like to my core, like I felt emotional. I wanted to cry. I did not feel like myself because I was so upset. And what I realized is that I was really rethinking about experiences that I had in my last company. I had one particular experience where I was on a global call with a very strong leader, and I had to work on a project that I didn't want to work on. I knew the outcome was not going to be what they wanted, but I still had to do it anyways because that's what the leadership did. They wanted me to do it. I did it. I presented it, and the leader was livid, as I knew he was going to be. And he yelled at me on a global call of over 100 and something people, top to bottom, front to back. I literally had to turn my camera off. I was in tears. It was so bad that someone else stepped on and said, like, let's move away from this. Like, we need to talk about this later. Other leaders reached out to that person later and said that is completely inappropriate. That's how you lose talent. It's not okay to have conversations like that. And the leader ultimately apologized. But now, sometimes when I go into meetings to this day, I get a little nervous with that power differential when I have to like really articulate myself, stand up for myself, because I'm kind of expecting that reaction of that leader. And lo and behold, I'm good with that leader now, like absolutely fine, but that experience still hurts.
The damage was already done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it could be an experience that's like that. It could be much larger. It could be smaller. But regardless, like you said, it's that trauma that happened. It's that experience that is most likely negative that impacts how you are. So when we talk about PTSD and workplace trauma, we talked a lot about this during the pandemic. The pandemic spurred so much of this conversation because I feel like when you're working in a job that's unhappy and you are in your house every day, it feels different than when you're going to the office and disconnect. But when you're sitting in your house every day not enjoying it, it hits differently. So do you feel that working remotely during the pandemic really spurred a whole new age of entrepreneurs?
Absolutely. I mean, I launched my business in the middle of the pandemic, the first year. And I know so many people who also went full force during the pandemic into entrepreneurship. And to your point, I think that, you know, a lot of us were able to reflect. We had time to think. We had time to detox from being zombies. And what I mean by that is when you're in corporate and you're going, and you're nonstop and everything is, you know, getting from point A to B as fast as you possibly can, you're not really checking in with you as a person. And so the pandemic happened. Everybody's working from home. People were really realistic with, hey, do I like this job or not, right? The same way I know a lot of people who got into the pandemic and they were looking at their partner like, yo, I don't like you.
Sitting here all day, every day,
right?
Working.
You know? So it really allowed space and time for people to reflect. And I can speak personally about myself. It really told me like it was time to go. Yeah. It confirmed it for me.
Yeah. When you think about that, what was the most challenging part of transitioning
into entrepreneurship?
Yes.
Woo. I mean, right now it's managing a team, right? But I think initially going into entrepreneurship, it is, for me, I was very conscious and I wanted to make sure that I was intentionally not bringing the damage and the trauma that I experienced in corporate into my company.
Wow, yes.
And so even though it was just me at the beginning, like I didn't have a team, I was very intentional on how I was treating myself and what things I was doing as I was starting to build this business.
Yeah, I think in the first chapter of my book, I say that leading people is not a rite of passage, it's a privilege. And I think we forget sometimes to lead people how we'd like to be led. And a lot of workplace trauma comes from relationships, not just the workload or the hours, all of that. Most of it, I would gather to say at least 75% comes from relationships that were not effective, disrespectful, traumatizing, et cetera. So that leading part is so crucial. And I understand on the hiring piece, it's hard.
Right.
One of the hardest parts of entrepreneurship.
Right. And then in entrepreneurship too, you have to lead yourself. Like that was, you know, I'm a very independent person. I know how to get things done. I've been in roles where I was an individual contributor, right? Lots of different roles. But then I've also been in roles where I've led teams. But being an entrepreneur, being the CEO, there's a different type of leadership that you also have to show up and provide for yourself.
There is. And I think it's so different. I think on another episode that I did with James Simpson, we kind of talked about that corporate mindset. And I gave this analogy of like standing in the middle of the ocean by yourself on this like totem pole and not knowing what to do. And entrepreneurship, if we think about that analogy, when I said it in the moment. I wasn't thinking about it like beforehand. That leading yourself toward whatever marker you set is so, it's not, I don't want to say it's so difficult, but it's such a different experience.
It is a different experience because, you know, in corporate, we are told what to do.
Yes.
Right? Even though you're an individual contributor, you're told what. So for example, when I was in sales, I was told what my sales needed to be. I was told what I needed to hit, what goals I needed to achieve. Versus as an entrepreneur, you're setting them for yourself. But when you're doing it, and tying this back to the PTSD, is making sure that you're not doing it from a place that can harm you, right? And you have to also make sure, because we get into entrepreneurship because it's supposed to provide freedom, right? So you have to make sure that you're doing these things that are going to be best for you and you're not continuing to cause trauma. So for example, if you're setting a business goal for yourself to make, let's say $500,000 and you're just starting out, you don't have any context, you're standing in the middle of the ocean. On the, what do you say? On the totem pole. On the totem pole. And you don't know what to do. It's like, okay, when you get to the end of that year and you don't hit that goal, you're causing trauma. Right? But it's because we've been taught to set goals in a certain way or to do things in a certain way. We bring that into our business. And that's what I mean by being very intentional with how I was leading myself as I started. And that's a hard transition. It's a hard transition.
What have you done? I guess a mindset question, I guess. What have you done day to day to help you almost recover, like shed the corporate mindset, the PTSD, the things that really impacted you? What have you done to kind of move away from that now?
Initially, I just slept. My first month out of corporate, seriously, my first month out of corporate, I thought something was wrong with me. I was like about to go see specialists and all this stuff. I could not get up before 11 a.m. And I'm usually somebody who gets up early. And I was talking to my husband about it, and he was like, you gotta give yourself some grace. Like, you've worked in corporate for 13, 14 years at this point. Like, just relax, right? So get your rest, because you really are detoxing from just this whole, again, this go, 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 go mentality. So I slept a lot. I do therapy. I don't really have a daily routine. That may sound horrible. I just kind of do what I feel like I need to do when I wake up in the morning, whatever is best for me. And that could be, you know, drinking some water, going for a walk. I might read, I might journal. I'm not really consistent on anything in the morning. It just is what I'm feeling in the moment.
And I think that's A-okay. And I think that kind of feeds into what we learn in corporate America. I feel like it seems like you're supposed to be doing things, or sometimes it's supposed to, and sometimes it's you have to.
Right.
Like, it can be either way, that you go about doing things a certain way, you show up in a certain way, you approach ideas in a certain way. And that transition can be difficult into figuring out what you're supposed to do as an entrepreneur. And I think I really love that you say you just do what you feel like you need. Because one of the things that I struggled with when I first left was, okay, well, what is the routine that I need? And I remember being on Instagram and it's like, okay, so what do all my favorite entrepreneurs do? So they get up every morning.
They get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and take that cold ass shower. It's not my life.
Exactly.
It's not my life. I just can't. It's not going to happen.
100%. I would see like the routines. It's like, so they get up like early in the morning and they go to the gym, and then they drink the ounces of water, and then they read the Bible app and share the quote, and then they journal, and then they go into like their top 5 things that they're supposed to do every single day, and then they lead their team. Like, when you look at successful entrepreneurs, you see them do the same thing over and over again. I was like, okay, well, this is what I need to do, because that's what all the successful entrepreneurs are doing. If I want to be successful, let me do what they're doing. But then you learn like what your groove is. Like for me, I have a morning routine now, but I would say it's much more fluid. It's like 7 activities that I kind of do how I'd like to do them. And I give myself grace not to be online by 9 a.m. Or be online by, sometimes it was 7 a.m. when I was in corporate America. I give myself the ability to flow a little bit more and see what feels good versus what I should do, or what I think I should do.
And I think that's very important, especially because a lot of the, a lot of the traumas that are put upon us or that we experience are put upon us because of the rigidity of the structure of what is corporate America. Right. And so you go into entrepreneurship and you think that you have to do the same things, and you actually don't. Right. Especially as women, we crave fluidity. That rigidity is not necessarily good for us. And that's why you have so many women that are, how can I describe it? I guess feeling like failures, right? You feel like a failure because you can't stick to a routine, or you can't do this the way that all the other people are doing it. And that is in and of itself causing more trauma, right? So we're doing what we learned when in actuality, what we learned is not necessarily a good thing.
100%.
It may work for you, it may not work for you. For me, it doesn't work.
What do you wish that you did while you were in a 9-to-5? Like, now having hindsight and being 2020, what would your advice? We have a lot of corporate professionals, a lot of nonprofit education, 9-to-5ers listening. What would you tell yourself back then to do?
As it pertains to what?
Kind of understanding the corporate PTSD while you're in it and taking care of yourself.
I would say to check in with your feelings, right? So again, you're going nonstop. If there's something that triggers you, regardless how small, how big it is, check in with your feelings. If you need to talk to a professional about it, talk to a professional about it. If you need to report somebody to HR, report them to HR, right? Make sure that you are taking care of yourself just as well as you would outside of corporate America, inside of the corporate space. So, I don't know if that answers your question, because these are things that I did. I don't know that I did them enough because of the corporate environment I was in. When certain things were reported, it was kind of kicked back like, oh, that's just how these people are. Yeah. And so, you have to really check in with yourself and say, okay, is this an environment where I can actually thrive knowing that this is how these people are? If this is what HR is going to tell me. Right.
Yeah. I think that kind of leads into just saying, if you're in an environment that is unhealthy, that's not supporting you. One of the chapters in my book is called How to Know When It's Time to Go. And sometimes you do not have to stay. I think sometimes we feel like we have to. This is how it is. This is the culture. But sometimes the culture may not be for you. Right. The culture may not be for you. The manager may not be for you. All the studies show that people leave bad managers, not bad companies most of the time. There are ways to work around. And I know I work with my clients a lot on how do you work around when you have a bad manager or a team or et cetera. How do you make it work? But I think we have to learn as 9-to-5ers how to make work for you versus always conforming to what is happening and not being afraid to move when something no longer serves you. So before I let you go today, I know we've talked a lot about our experience as 9-to-5ers, but I want you to tell the people what you do. Tell the people where you are. What are you working on? What's happening? Because she did some really dope stuff, y'all.
Do I?
Yes, you do.
Okay. So let's see. You can find my podcast, Stacking M's, Marketing, Money, and Mindset, on all podcast platforms, as well as on YouTube, where I'm talking about just that, right? Marketing, money, and mindset as it pertains to consumer product-based brands and how to actually use marketing to grow those brands. You can find me on Instagram at Tara So Ether, and my website is tarapaton.com. We are going to be launching some exciting things this year, so you can tap in with us in the community on Instagram. And just for now, listen to the podcast. Let me know how you like it. Let me know how you love it. That's really it. Yeah.
Rate, subscribe,
all that stuff, thumbs up, all that good stuff.
Yes, indeed. We support our fellow podcasters here. So thank y'all so much for joining us. Thank you for joining us. And thank y'all for tuning in. And may your next move be your very best move. Have a great day, y'all. Are these deadlines doable? What are the steps you need to take? Let's break this down into bite-sized pieces so you no longer feel like you're overwhelmed.